Us for another installment of Lunchtime Lessons. Appreciate you guys all being here today. Before we kick things off, I just want to mention, as always, if you're interested in learning about future sessions coming up, you can follow us on social media or check out our events calendar, and both of which you'll find in the chat box. Today, we're joined by David Thornburgh, who's the president and CEO of Committee of 70. Committee of 70 is a nonpartisan civic leadership organization, and they work in advancing ethical and effective government in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. And they do this through citizen engagement and public policy advocacy. David is here to share some of the actions we can take as citizens to help contribute to a thriving democracy and become more informed and engaged participants in the political process. So we really appreciate him coming on today to share his insights. And with that, I give you David Thornburgh.
Sure. Hey, thanks, Jake. And welcome to all of you. I hope you have a sandwich, or it's not too early for a beer. It's 5 o'clock somewhere out there. So I'm glad to spend a couple minutes with you. Just to satisfy your curiosity, I'm appearing in front of what's a virtual Volkswagen, but is actually a physical Volkswagen parked in our driveway that we call sort of the company car of the Committee of 70. You can see we've got two sort of hashtags. One is Make My Vote Count, which is something we firmly believe in. And then we've got also recognition of our incredible citizen mapping competition called Draw the Lines PA, which is pushing back on partisan gerrymandering in Pennsylvania. And before I get too further, I just wanted to shout out to the Science Center. I've worked with the Science Center for years and years. In fact, when I was hired to Committee of 70, our chair was Steve Tang, the CEO of the Science Center, who did a terrific job as our chair for a couple of years. So, and I'm delighted you guys are organizing this. So I'm here to talk to you about a new initiative that we launched just about a month ago called We Vote. And We Vote has two sort of purposes. One is, in the short term, we're trying to make sure that every voter, every citizen in the Commonwealth is fully prepared to vote safely and securely in these upcoming elections. And as our world has changed, one of the things we want to make sure that people know is that we can vote by mail in Pennsylvania with no excuse whatsoever. And we encourage folks to do that because we think it's good for you and it's good for us. And we'll talk some more about that. Long term, though, what we're trying to do in We Vote is to encourage a stronger culture of voting and citizenship. And I think we all know that voter participation and maybe habits of citizenship in this country, in this region, in this Commonwealth are not what they should be. We live in vitriolic times, I'll say. We've got this sort of hyper-partisan warfare all around us, and we firmly believe that one of the antidotes to that is to encourage everyone to understand the rights and responsibilities of citizenship and how that relates to the larger political process. So let me give you a quick share of the, just to show you the We Vote website, and then I'm going to talk through the various elements of the program. So not surprisingly, the website is wevote.70.org. And I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on this one, which is the 5 habits of effective citizenship, which we have kind of assembled from our own thinking and research about what we know about what makes for effective, active citizenship. So let me stop the share. You get the picture. And let's walk through the 5 habits of effective citizenship. First of all is to be a voter. And that's sort of like the gateway to effective citizenship. It's an act on the one hand. It literally means this time around you fill out your ballot at home and stick it in the mail, or if you're able and willing, you show up on June 2nd to vote in the primary and November 3rd. But we're consciously saying that this is not just about voting. It's not just I voted, but encouraging people to think of themselves as voters, that it's part of your identity. Once it's part of your identity, it takes on new meaning and significance and so forth. But having said that, I'll presume that most of you don't need to be encouraged to get out and vote, but if you run across somebody who does, if you've got friends, colleagues, families who's like, why bother? My advice is simply like, just suck it up and go vote. Even if you think like it doesn't matter and it doesn't count and whatever, to make the action, force yourself to do it. And then that'll be sort of the first step towards this path of seeing yourself as a voter. In encouraging that, we've got on the WeVote site and on the overall 70.org site, all kinds of cutting edge tools that voters can use to learn about the election, the deadlines, the candidates, the issues. We've got a cool little tool that we're calling BYO Ballot, which allows you to make your picks for who you want to vote for, download that to your phone, share it with friends if you like. It's kind of an easy, efficient way of sorting through the clutter and equipping yourself with the basic tool that reminds you who you want to support. So that's everything around Be a Voter. And again, we sort of see that as kind of the gateway to, it's necessary but not sufficient to be an effective and active citizen. So the second in the habits is to choose your news wisely. And this is particularly challenging these days because we're all being bombarded by not just the legacy media, but everyone who's got a website and an opinion all of a sudden is a journalist and is spewing stuff of varying quality that we're trying to sort and sift through. So it's really important. It's maybe more important than ever that we all get some sense of how to sort and sift. And what we've done on the website is to say, here's some tools that you can use to give you a sense of, I hesitate to use the word fake news, but what's good news and what's bad news. And I'll just give you an example. One of the tools that we came across is a browser plugin called NewsGuard, which was designed by some journalists, veteran journalists, one of whom was the editor or the publisher of the Wall Street Journal. So we've been doing this for a while. And it's a plugin that uses a red, green, yellow they call it a nutrition label to give you a sense of the quality of the news site that you're viewing. And someone just asked, what's the name of that plugin? It's called NewsGuard. And the website is newsguardtech.com. You can put it on your phone. It'll actually monitor the sources that you see in your Facebook feed. So it's predicated on the notion that rather than try to fact check individual sources, if you trust the source, you can trust the content. I'm really taken with that. Also, you'll find on the WeVote site, I did a webcast interview with the founder of NewsGuard, so you can learn more about how it all came about and how it works. So choose your news wisely. The next in the habits is invite diverse perspectives. It's not unrelated to choosing your news wisely, but this says, like, you owe it to yourself and to others that you share your opinions with to, let's call it, pressure test your assumptions about the way the world works, or who did what to whom, or what conspiracy you might see lurking around a corner. And one way to do that is you invite other perspectives. People are all wired differently. And it's important, even if all it does is confirm your own perspective, that you get others to do that. One of the tools that we have there is we have something at the Committee of 70 called the Pennsylvania Project on Civic Engagement. And this is run by my colleague Chris Satullo, who is a longtime journalist, and they are hosting, originally was intended to host in-person sessions, but now doing virtual sessions of a format called Can We Talk, which brings together people from various political perspectives, particularly targeted to young folks, and to get them to talk through their own experiences and their own views of the world as a way of not trying to change anybody's mind, but at least, again, sort of pressure test your assumptions about how things work and the views that you might have. So that's third. So we got be a voter, choose your news, invite diverse perspectives. Number 4 is a significant one, which again, sort of climbing the ladder of citizenship which is figure out how it works. You know, this means everything from you're asking me to vote for the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. What's that person do exactly? And why is that significant? Why would that be meaningful to my life, my family, my community? But it also means, you know, getting deeper into the process of public functions like drafting a budget. A lot of concern right now in the city of Philadelphia about how the economic situation affects tax revenues, and then the choices that the mayor and city council have to make about how they spend those tax revenues. So if you don't, you can rant and rail and, you know, over your beer all you want to your friends about they ought to do this or they ought to do this or whatever. But, you know, an effective citizen takes it on him or herself to sort of dig in and say, I have some understanding of how this works. And I framed some ideas of my own, and I want to share those with my elected representatives. There's a magic power that accumulates once you understand how it works, which is, you know, the folks in the business of politics and government, this is what they live and die on. So we're not expecting you to become arcane experts, but, you know, effective citizens get some insight into that because it allows you to solve problems. You know, at the end of the day, if you're unhappy that the park across the street from you is a mess or that your neighborhood school isn't what it should be, once you know how it works, then you take on extra added ability to make those kinds of changes. So learn how it works. And the last, which is highly related to what I was just talking about, is to act. And we live in a time where there's a lot of cynicism about elected officials and that they don't listen to their constituents. And I'll push back a little bit on that. A friend of mine who was an elected mayor a while back said to me, gave me a little piece of advice. She said, anytime you hear an elected official say to you, I've heard from a number of people about this issue or that issue, that number could in fact be 1, because 1 is a number. So which is to say, don't underestimate the power of your voice communicated effectively to a public official. And in doing that, of course, we have more tools at our disposal than we ever have before. You can email, you can text, of course, there's this thing called a telephone and even the mail. But, you know, to capture your story in a short little video and to put that in front of a public official can have a powerful effect. Elected officials I know this, having worked with many of them over the years, are highly sensitive to stories. And when they hear a poignant story about how their decisions affected somebody or a group of people, it sticks with them. They'll repeat it. You'll hear it in their own presentations and remarks. And ultimately, it's often what drives them to sponsor a piece of legislation, just all based on someone that they ran into who looked them in the eye and said, Senator, Governor, City Council person, this is my situation, this is my story, hear me and understand how you affect that story. So that's the 5th habit, which is action. And of course, action also means anything. It's online digital advocacy, it's in-person advocacy when that's possible again. all of this stuff, makes a difference in each in its own way. So let me just, I'll share the screen one more time just so we all see this. WeVote.70.org, the 5 habits, be a voter, invite perspectives, choose your news wisely, learn how it works, and act. Let me just close, and then I'll open it up to questions. Just a couple of key reminders. May 26th in Pennsylvania is the last date that you can use to request a mail ballot, okay? So, and the process is you have to apply for it, and then it's sent to you, and then you have to turn it in. Do not wait. If you don't have a mail ballot or haven't requested one, do it today. It's very easy. Go to votespa.com. That's the state's website. It takes all of a minute and a half to fill out the online application. And if you leave your email on the website, you then have the ability to track your application and your ballot along the way. So you can see when they sent it out, when they received it back from you, when they send out your ballot, when you send your ballot in, and so forth and so on. So there's really no excuse. And I should point out, in the city of Philadelphia, already 150,000 voters have requested mail-in ballots. So you'll be in good company. And that relieves pressure on people who need to vote in person on June 2nd. It relieves health concerns among people who work at the polls, many of whom are retired and older. It's just, I said at the outset, it's a good thing for you and it's a good thing for us. That mail ballot needs to be back in the hands of election officials by 8 o'clock on June 2nd. So again, no excuse not to turn it around as fast as you can. If you get down to the wire and you only have a few days left before June 2nd, not sure I would trust it to the mail. By that point, you need to find out how to deliver that ballot in person. And frankly, the city is still working out the details. My expectation is they will at very least have like a secure mailbox in front of City Hall, but they might do some other things. And we're a little impatient, more than a little impatient with them that they haven't figured that out yet. But mail ballot, May 26th deadline, votespa.com, June 2nd, it's got to be in the hands of election officials by 8 o'clock that night. So let me stop there, and I'll be happy to answer any and all questions. I saw one, let's see, in the chat. How early can mail ballots be done for the general election in November? I don't know the specific answer to that, but let me just point out one of the options you have when you register to receive a mail ballot is you can check the box that says, yes, please just automatically send me one for the November election as well. So you don't have to go through the whole process again. So if you want to do that, just check the box. The timing of when those ballots get sent out has to do with the date by, among other things, the date by which the formal ballot is determined. Sometimes there are legal challenges to candidates or other kinds of processes that have to be ironed out. But it's typically, the ballot is prepared, I think, either 60 days before the election or at least 30 days. But, that ballpark. And I just encourage you to refer back to the Committee of 70 website or votespa.com and you'll see those deadlines. So other questions, feel free to fire away on the chat or just be brave and ask them in person.
Yeah, while people might have questions, I do have a couple of my own, David. I wanted to jump back to the inviting diverse perspectives point. Obviously people can't gather during this time. And that's, for a lot of people probably mostly when they engage in discussions other than like inflammatory posts on Facebook and those kinds of debates. So do you have any resources or ideas for people to engage in discussion with other members of their communities?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will tell you that I have I think engaging in flame wars on Twitter or on Facebook is a total waste of time. And I know we all get our little dopamine hits by standing up and being self-righteous and I'm right and you're wrong. But like, is that how you want to spend your life? Really? So, but I don't know the answer to your question. I would refer you, I think we've got a couple of, again, web-based resources on our site that there's something I should know these, but there's a couple of cool things, cool tools that people are developing that give you both sides of an issue or give you sort of the straight down the middle approach. And again, just go look at the wevote.70.org website and under invite diverse perspectives. I see a note from Sharon Pritchett. Hello, Sharon. I hope you're well. Who said, I only asked for a mail-in ballot for the primary. Can I apply again for the vote for the November vote later? And the answer is yes. So you'll have a chance to go at it again. Okay, other questions in the chat, live questions?
Hi,
Jay?
David. Actually, that was a question that I was just going to answer. And other than the voting in November, I wanted to ask you, will this ongoing happen next year, or is this really for the COVID situation now? Do you have any guidance on that?
Sure. Well, the vote by mail option, or we like to call it the vote at home option, was passed by the governor and legislature last year, long before we knew we were going to have this pandemic. So that will be a permanent ability that a permanent option that voters will have going forward. It's not just a temporary thing because of the pandemic. And, everybody's got their own opinion. I voted by mail. I really enjoyed the experience. Sat down at the kitchen table with my wife. Okay, we had a drink. It's different. It doesn't have the sort of maybe the energy of showing up at the polling place, but it's a rich experience you can't beat the convenience as well. But to your point, yeah, that'll be an ability that voters will have going forward.
Thank you very much. I absolutely agree with you. I miss the local people I see at my polling place every year, but having that ballot, and I voted last week, does give you the ability to vote on some questions. I think there were 2 this year, and then really think about it, talk about people, and come back to it, which is something.
Yeah.
Well,
there's this thing called the internet too that we invented that allows you to go online and say, like, I don't even know what the Court of Common Pleas does. So let me just take a sec before I vote for that candidate and figure out the answer to that question. Let me just say a quick word about, we've got a lot of questions on our website and elsewhere about fraud or partisan hijinks or whatever around a vote by mail. First of all, I'll point you to a website that is not too far from the Science Center, which is factcheck.org. Factcheck.org has a very good summary of the research that's been done on vote by mail and allegations of fraud. The research tells us 2 things over and over and over again. One is neither party is advantaged by mail voting. Okay, it benefits both. So put aside all the sort of craziness about that. The second is it does encourage turnout, not by leaps and bounds. It doesn't turn low turnout populations into high turnout populations, but it does make a difference. And by the way, when we survey voters and say, do you like this? About 70% say, yeah, I actually really do. I think they do value the convenience and the sort of kitchen table democracy that it allows for. So, factcheck.org, if you're of a research mind, I would head there and that'll tell you the scoop on what we know about vote by mail. So,
great. Cool.
Other questions?
I don't see any questions. I was just thinking the vote by mail, I just thought about when you said a kitchen table democracy. I think actually an interesting opportunity for people below voting age to kind of get an inside look into the process that they might not get. Well, they wouldn't get at a polling place normally.
That's a great point. I always encourage people, if you're voting in person, to take your kids to the polls, because it like gives them a sense of what this is all about. But probably an even better experience is you're sitting down, over breakfast on a Saturday morning, and you get your kids and you say, we're going to vote now, and let me show you the ballot. Let me explain to you who these people are, talk about the candidates, which, by the way, one of the things about voting at home is I always feel when I go to the polls, if there's a long line, like this sort of tension, that I want to make sure I vote quickly because there's 15 other people in back of me and everybody's got to get to work or get home or whatever. So you don't have that anxiety voting at home. But Jake, that's a great point. Someone asked, is there any data on how mail-in votes can or will affect on statistics that are normally taken from exit polls? I don't know. One of the things we do know about that oops, sorry, my phone just went off. One of the things that I think will dawn on us if we in fact start voting more by mail is it changes a lot of things that we had taken for granted about how politics works, about how campaigns work. Probably all of us who have gone to the polls have worked at the polls have been confronted with someone who is essentially a paid volunteer who shoves a piece of paper in your face and to encourage you to vote for that slate of candidates, so-called sample ballot. And frankly, that has a huge influence on voters, and it's, let's just say, not exactly what Thomas Jefferson had in mind. You can't do that if you vote at home. Like, you can't campaign that way. You can't, what are you going to have, somebody stationed at your mailbox to hand you something? So that's just the tip of the iceberg in how voting by mail happens at home. And to your point about exit polls, I don't even know how you would do an exit poll. You'd have to catch a voter, I guess, by phone or online and ask them whether they'd already voted and get some sense of that. But say one more point about voting by mail this time around. The volume is going to be so huge that we should not expect, certainly in June, that we're going to know at 8:01 who won the election, who won the elections, which is fine by me, because frankly, if you have a choice between doing it right and doing it fast, how about if we just pick doing it right, even if that means the vote is not finished until Friday or Saturday or Sunday. And we're encouraging election officials to tell us now when we should expect to get the count. But it's not going to be 8:01, likely, absolutely on June 2nd, and likely on November 3rd. So, other questions, comments?
I had a quick question. So actually 2 questions. One, so I did get my mail-in ballot, but say I didn't get it in on time, would I still be able to go to the polls? Even with my ballot, like I didn't turn it in, so if I have it in my presence, but if I don't send it in by the 26th, would I be able to?
Yeah, I believe there is a process, and you can check this at votespa.com, where you can show up at the polls with your vote and ballot, and they'll invalidate your mail ballot and then allow you to vote in person. You should always know that if there's ever any dispute about your ability to vote, you're always allowed to vote what's called provisionally, which means you go sort of into a separate category at the at the polling place, and those votes will be considered after the fact, so that that will give them a chance to say, hey, look, we have her vote by mail or ballot here, so we're going to count that because that came in before the election, and we're going to validate her, her provisional vote. But that is always an option, provisional ballots.
And are you able? So if you're a registered, like one party or the other in the primary, are you able to write in a non-Republican candidate, or if you're a Democrat, write in a Republican as the write-in on the ballot? I mean, I guess it's a write-in, so.
Yeah, it is a write-in, and yeah, I believe so. And I'm trying to remember my own mail ballot I did a couple weeks ago. I think you have that option.
There was certainly a write-in, like there was certainly a write-in on the mail ballot. And I never really thought about it when I've voted in person, but I've never done a mail ballot before. So it was because I had this mail ballot in front of me that you start to question different things. And I just couldn't remember if I could, I mean, obviously I could write in anyone, but does it invalidate it if it's, not the right party?
No, I will say this, this is sort of like the protocol involved in taking standardized tests. You have to make sure you follow the instructions.
Fill in the bubble.
Fill in the bubble. There's a separate envelope. You first put your ballot in an inner envelope. It goes into an outer envelope. And just as with like college applications and so forth, you have to make sure you sign the envelope over the seal, because if you don't sign it, it won't count. So just short story, follow the instructions. Not difficult, but every step matters.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you, David. Really appreciate you sharing your time and your insight and answering all our questions.
Sure. Well, thanks for hosting this. Great questions. And I'll say once again, bears repeating. Well, A, wevote.70.org, and B, get your stuff in gear to get your mail ballot and make sure it gets there on time.
All right. Absolutely. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you at the next session.